there's homophobia within the white experience towards the Black experience.
You know, gayness is only whiteness wrapped up in a bunch of dicks, and that's the difference.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Queer Conversations. I'm your host, LaToya Williams, and I'm here with my good friends, Dr. Durryle Brooks and Jeff Harris. Tell our viewers a little something about yourselves.
Hey everyone, my name is, as LaToya said, Dr. Durryle Brooks. I am a researcher in the Department of Epidemiology at Johns Hopkins University, and I also oversee our Black LGBT Pride organization in Baltimore.
And my name is Reverend Jeff Harris, and I am a Dean of Students for a charter school here in Baltimore City. I'm also an international lecturer, been published multiple times, as well as a published writer of short stories and articles, and soon to be coming out with my first book, hopefully by the end of the year.
Awesome. Now, where can both of you be found on social media?
Yes, I can be found on Facebook at Jeffrey Harris International Ministries with upcoming other social media avenues.
And folks can find me on my Facebook and Instagram, and also on my website, which is Durryle.com.
Awesome. So we're going to get into some sizzling subjects. So, you know, recently Andy Cohen, which is a huge producer for Bravo's Real Housewives, the franchises all over the country, he had a baby, a beautiful little boy, via surrogate. How do we feel about fathering children? And there's no mention of a partner.
That's interesting.
I think that anyone who has the audacity, or I don't want to say audacity, like
The boldness, yes,
to actually father a child, whether it's through intimacy or surrogation, it doesn't matter. As long as you're willing to and able to provide the necessary essentials to raise a child to live in this climate and this culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for me, I thought it was pretty standard. I wasn't really surprised by that. What I was surprised by, that folks then got on him because he was on Grindr, trying to get a date. Knowing that he just had a baby. And so that's,
don't cut him short.
Listen, he's looking for a baby daddy. Let him get a baby daddy.
Yeah, so good on the father thing, and then questionable on just the baby,
finding somebody.
3 weeks old and you on Grindr.
So if you all remember, I would say late last year, the basketball player Dwight Howard was outed by his lover. It was that tea was very hot. Did either of you see those articles that were published, and the tweets and the Instagram posts? And
I saw bits and pieces. It just was too much for me to handle at that time, considering that most of them always come off as though I'm not like that, and they always have somebody in the background. Because I saw a meme one time that said, just because your boyfriend might have a side chick, but it might not always be a chick. So
very true.
I'm always with that one.
That when we're in these professional spaces where masculinity and sort of the assumption of sexuality or heterosexuality specifically is so enforced, like to out someone like that could be affecting their livelihood. And I'm not sure, and that's not to come to his aid, I'm not sure, because he might have instigated something with the boo thing, and that's why he was just like, you know what? Let me put you on blast because you put me on blast.
Right.
And so I don't know any about that, but I just when it comes to disclosure and disclosing and sort of outing folks, it's just not how I roll.
Yeah. I thought it was really crass.
So I'm never an advocate for outing, but at some point, when do we start living in authentic spaces? Like, I know it's your livelihood, and I know this is how you survive and all of that. But if you're going to be authentic, you should be authentic fully, as much as possible.
Right.
Because it does have a backlash to it if it comes out. Having been in ministry for over 20 some years, every leader I've served under, they've always known from the onset,
right,
I'm same gender loving, because I don't want that. And even so the congregation knew that this is my partner, whoever that was at the time, or my husband, former ex-husband, because I don't want that ever to be a backlash.
Right. And true enough, we want everyone to live authentically, absolutely, but not everyone has the courage to do that. It's sad in 2019, but that's the fact. So one of the other things I wanted to talk to you guys about is homophobia in the media. So it concerns me about the portrayal of gay men in media. the overly flamboyant. How do you all feel about how gay men are portrayed? Specifically, do we always sit in a stereotype?
I mean, I think that's tough because I feel like a part of like that question, sort of in some ways, it disparages or sort of like tries to erase the fact that there are just high femme Black gay men. And that is beautiful and that's wonderful and that's fine. It's more than fine, actually. It's
beautiful.
And so I think, and at the same time, when you look at media portrayals, that's sort of like, it's not just that they're high femme, but they're used as character points or plots or making the bunt of jokes. Right. And like, that's sort of that's the problem for me. Mm-hmm. And not the fact that there's, we have high femme Black gay men out here. Just like you would have the spectrum around gender presentation. So you have the Dwight Howards who are more masculine and we don't know their his particular sexual orientation, but is willing to be in a relationship with a man. So from that perspective, gender.
I'm in the process of started writing a paper last year, infiltration of hip hop into LGBT culture. And just from the study of it, it is a complete imbalance when you talk about hypermasculinity and superiority in femme presentation.
Right.
But it's not a balance. And so how do we balance that to let, Michael Johnson, I think it was, Magic Johnson's son.
Right.
EJ just kind of kicked the door down, lost all his weight, shaved his head, and just was like, hey girl, I'm here.
Right, he's very cute now.
He's very cute now, yeah, with all the extra, lost all the poundage. But so it's not a negative thing. Mm-hmm. My concern is always around safety. Because you do see more LGBT, high femme, trans persons, high femme individuals are the ones that are being,
assaulted.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are being taunted. Those are the ones, especially when I deal with children all day. And so I have a lot of children, or seen a lot of children that actually do get to the space of suicide. Yeah. They're high levels of anxiety. They also have a lot of depression that goes on. And so for me, it's a matter of being able to not just deal with the child directly, but also dealing with the parents and dealing with community. Like, it's okay for this person to present themselves with tracks, dress,
however they
purse,
choose.
Whatever your expression is, it's okay. And it's okay for you to be hyper-masculine, sagging, baseball cap, whatever you want to do, because that is my space. That is my life. That is my truth.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. I read an article by the National Center for Biotechnical Info. They did a study on attitudinal trends. So they studied from 1977 to 2003, discussing how the public attitudes about LGBT persons has improved. However, recently there are 15 states where it's legal to fire someone based on their sexual preference. There are many articles about people being assaulted based on their sexual preference. There was a video of a young man in Salt Lake City, where as soon as he identified himself as gay, he was beat up and it was videotaped. So do we think that the climate is better, or is it not better based on our current governmental society?
I think it's a toss between two. Because again, doing a lot of writing, I have to do a lot of research.
Absolutely.
And so I remember reading an article last year where a young lady came out as being same-gender loving at her church. And the people in the church physically assaulted her after church.
That's awful.
Literally, and this is the house of God. This is where I come to have my communion, my safe space.
Right.
To develop that relationship, and she was assaulted behind that. There's a young lady who lives here in Baltimore who went through the exact same thing. She was homeless, and she went to the church. That's where she was a member, and she needed a place to stay, and the person that she was going to be staying with, when she found out that she was same-gender loving, I'm sorry, you can't stay
here. Right.
And so it just depends, and it also depends on the country or the part of the country that you live in.
So it's geographical as well.
Thing. We have a lot of churches that are popping up that are safe spaces. And then we have a lot of places that are trying to be inclusive,
but don't quite know what inclusive means.
We're not sure how to do that.
Yes, but that's where your organizations come in to train those organizations on how to accommodate same-gender loving folks. So everyone knows about the Jussie Smollett drama, right? Like, it's been going on for months. It will continue going on for months. But recently, his co-stars all band together to make sure he wasn't fired from Empire. So how do we feel about supporting each other in public spaces and in professionalism, regardless of our sexuality?
Well, I mean, I think that case, I feel like we don't know the facts. We don't know anything. We know what people let slip out.
Bits and pieces, yes.
What people sort of have used the media to sort of, this would be the first time they use the media to sort of denigrate Black folks or a Black LGBT person or to smear them or to, especially from the Chicago Police Department.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I just want to be like, until we have the facts and the receipts, Jussie's safe and he should be held. And we should be banding around him with our colleagues across this country to make sure that he has all of the support he needs to address sort of the trauma that sort of lives in you after you have a violent attack against you.
Right. I like the term bending around him, just giving him that support. I really like that. And I think also, they've used the media to sway public opinion in a lot of ways, which is so unfair. We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. I'm sorry, Jeff, you were saying something?
Yes, I think we should. I love that term as well, bending around. I think for me, the biggest question mark for me was when the police tried to get him to release his phone to try and gather additional information for clarity. I'm all about clarifying and being able to prove myself.
But was it really for clarity or was it being nosy?
But we don't, from a legal perspective, because I've worked for years in the law and in the legal field, it is always about, we need to gather all of the facts. And the fact that he wouldn't release his phone, yes, it's his personal phone, but we're talking about your freedom and the possibility of all these lawsuits coming against you. So if it's legitimate, what it was, release the phone.
Do you think he was obstructing by not releasing his phone or sending redacted records?
Yeah, so I don't remember them ever actually subpoenaing the phone. They didn't subpoena the phone.
Correct.
So had they subpoenaed the phone, then he would have to release it. But they came to him and asked him, let us see your phone so we can follow up for more additional clarity, and he refused. His response was, well, I have all my professional people in here,
right,
from the set that I do business with, and I understand all of that. But we're talking about your freedom and the fact that they're trying to connect it to something that was not question mark was challenging for me. Granted, he got off.
But once again, I feel like that little bit of gathering or part of the investigation should not have been public knowledge. I think that that's a conversation that should have been had between the department, the investigative detectives, and his attorneys, and Jussie, and whoever else. Should it have been on TMZ?
No, but I think that the fact that he is a public figure, and the fact that he's LGBT, and he's out,
and he's black,
let's
be clear,
that's what I believe drove it to be. But it drove it to be a public conversation. For me, as we were mentioning earlier, the Chicago police already got a whole lot of and check marks and everything about them is shady.
I'm like, find the serial killer that's getting these women.
Yeah, they won't do
Hello, instead of aggravating Jussie. But anyways, I digress. So I want to talk about some of the public apologies that have been coming out for homophobia. So recently there was Kevin Hart, who was going to host the Oscars, and they told him if he didn't apologize, that they weren't going to allow him to host, blah, blah, blah. This was sometime last year. Then he apologized. And then he said he apologized again, and then he refused to apologize any further. So my thing, 2 questions. Are the public apologies really genuine, or are they just so that they can keep their job? And secondly, do comedians get a pass? Do they get to talk about anything? Is everyone, sexuality, race, gender, are they fair game in comedians?
So for me, when we talk about public apology, it's an apology. And you really never know the true authenticity of it. If I tell you I'm sorry, you either take it or you don't. Because the truth is you really don't know. It comes from the intent. It comes from a heart space. And so if I offended you, and here we go with scripture. The scripture says that if your brother offends you, then you should go to them and you should offer an apology.
Make it right.
Make it right. And so the fact that he did come forth and he made it right, he apologized, And then he came back again and apologized.
And then he went on Ellen.
And then he went on Ellen's show, and he was like, yeah,
hey, Ellen.
I ain't doing that no more.
Right.
But no, you don't get a pass.
So you get to apologize, but you don't get a pass
You don't get a pass to keep it like, because if I'm sorry, then that means I'm not doing it again.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you continue to do it again. And him and all of his cohorts of
Come on now, we don't want to lump them all into one big pool.
No, when I say the cohort, I'm talking about those that continuously use LGBT as an opportunity to make us the butt of your jokes.
Right.
Like, great example, Monique, the butt of her jokes are always plus size girls. When she did that segment with that big red jumpsuit on, it was always around plus size girls. We didn't hear her complain about plus size girls.
But because she was part of the community. So it's very different if you're saying things that are funny about the community that you're already a part of. If you are not a gay man or a lesbian woman or a trans person, how can you make that person the butt of a joke when you cannot relate on any level? That's just my opinion. I'd like to hear what you...
And I think sort of for me, what I see in that is that I have seen great comedy come from not only LGBT folks, from straight folks, still poking fun at sort of dynamics in the community,
right,
without making us sort of the problem.
Right.
Or, they're usually talking about something, about some sort of ways of being that we can identify with as a member of that community, and sort of, so we get to say, that's funny, because they're telling the truth about something.
Right.
And not necessarily because they're trying to put us down. And I feel like sort of the jokes from like Kevin Hart, D.L. Hughley, and there are a whole bunch of other folks, and particularly black men, who have used us as an opportunity to sort of garner jokes and to play on the worst parts of us. Because they could be having a conversation about black LGBT folks and making it funny by pointing the finger at straight folks for doing fucked up shit towards us. Like, that's what they could be doing. But that's not what they're doing. Instead, they make us the problem, and they don't do anything about that.
Right.
So for me, let's talk about the homophobia. Let's make a joke about sort of what is it meant for you as a parent to try to take care of your child, and yet instead of showing up for them, you sort of show up and try to silence them because you're too afraid.
Exactly.
Or
talk about how you're able to deal or unable to deal with the fact that your child has come out, as opposed to hide them in the closet or putting them in a trash can or beating it out of them.
Exactly.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, not funny.
So that's why I said you don't get a pass.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. You don't get a pass. But at the same token, I agree with you, Durryle, that parents should be there. You fathered or mothered this child. Why are you using their orientation to negate them, disqualify, dehumanize, demoralize them?
And then make a joke out of it.
And then you make a joke out of it.
And go on tour talking about it. So at this point, we're going to go to commercial. We have to pay the bills. We have to pay for all of this. We'll be right back with more from our lovely guests, Dr. Brooks and Reverend Harris, in just a moment. Stay tuned. Again to Marva Law's Same Gender Love, Love is Love Boutique. We really appreciate everything that you've done. Now let's get back into these questions. Thank you again for being my guest. Don't hate me after this.
Of course not.
So my first question is, how do you both identify?
We gay. And I think what's interesting is that this is my uncle, my biological uncle, and so how I show up is I'm a second generation gay. So
that's
it's great
awesome.
to have an uncle who has lived his life longer than me with the same identity, sexual identity, and then to come along and have that as a path.
Oh, that's awesome.
Understand sort of what's happening.
So someone is kind of guiding you through this process, at least when you were younger, to kind of help you along with the process. And did you come out? And if so, kind of when?
So,
Okay, I'm not asking for your whole coming out story.
Not mine. I remember his. I remember mine and his.
Yes.
So,
I mean, but my question is, did you feel the need to come out, really?
I don't think I was ever in the closet.
Well, not from the stories I heard as a child, because they said, because he used to be much lighter. As you get older, apparently you get darker. He used to be this hot yellow red thing with these long nails. And all I would hear from my sisters and my aunts and them is that he's like, who is he? He's with that man. That's his friend. And then I'm just like, I know. So then I knew growing up that my uncle was gay. Like, even if no one ever actually explicitly
said it, right?
I knew.
It
awesome.
Was, I don't think I ever was in the closet.
Ever.
Nope. I mean, I went through my preppy stage with loafers. I remember when my mom and I used to actually sit and do the clear polish on our nails. And so that was funny. But then when I officially, I guess, moved, I remember one day I called and I was like, Mom, I need to borrow some money because it was a Friday night. And I'm going to the club, and she was like, so why don't you ask one of them men that keep calling me? Like, it was
gag, honey.
Yeah.
Gag. Like you thought she didn't know, but she knew.
And then I moved out, got my own place back in downtown Baltimore, and she called me one night. I was asleep. And she was like, I just gotta ask you a question real quick. No, she said, hey babe. I said, hey mom, what's up? She was like, I asked you a real quick question. I was like, yeah, what's up? She was like, are you gay? I was like, yes ma'am. She was like, all right, call me when you wake up. I hung up the phone.
The whole coming out in 1 minute.
That was all it was.
Yes ma'am.
His incident was, his sister called me one day and she was like, you need to talk to your nephew because he got caught kissing such and such and such and such and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, first off, calm down.
Were you supposed to talk him out of it? Or help him? I mean,
I don't know what it was. I mean, I was really religious back then, so I'm assuming that I was going to pray the gay away or something. And I said, well, this is what we need to do. We need to love him in spite of until we know for sure. Because what you don't want is for him to end up going into the streets and then 6 months down the road, you won't recognize who he is.
Right.
And from then, I don't remember anything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, so for me, like the first person I actually came out to actually was my grandma, so his mom. And so we, because I was also caught kissing my first boyfriend in the church house, y'all, which was, it was good.
Lord.
It was a good time in the Lord. And so it was holy. And then actually it was church related, and we were whatever. I'm not going to go the whole story there, but when I told her, because my boo thing at that time, his mom called and my grandma, because they were close, and then basically they sat down because they were like trying to figure out what to do with what was going on. And so this is like 16 years old, sort of emergent identity around sexuality, trying to figure out this thing called life in a religious context that was pretty conservative in many ways. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But basically, so my uncle got the call. He talked to my mom. My mom set me down, and I just was like, this is who I am, leave me alone. And so I was really angry. I was really frustrated because there was a lot going on at that time. Trying to tell people the truth about who I am and trying to get support that wasn't really there. Yeah. And being angry because they didn't show up the way that I wanted them. And I think sort of as I reflect on that experience, it was just like, I would have wished for something more, but it was so helpful. As I talk about it being a second generation gay, is that I had an uncle at least I could talk to
right
about sort of what I was feeling, and I'm not left alone. And
it came from love, and it was all nurturing and guidance, which is so important.
Right. And I also have an older brother that's gay. And so like my oldest, who's 40, and we're celebrating him today, and he's younger, so he told me like these streets. So when we were out partying, and I'm young, so I'm surrounded in a community and a bio family that is also pretty gay, which I really appreciate.
The other piece was that when I met Durryle's godfather now, dad now, Pastor Jamie Washington. Shout
out to
Jamie,
UFC.
Jamie and Sam, love them. I knew that I had got to a space where I could not guide him any further. And I remember going to Jamie and saying, like, he came to me and was like, I love your nephew, blah, 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 blah. So, of course, my antennas went up like, sir, you're too old. Let's get that clear.
Let's be clear.
Let's be clear. But it wasn't that. And I released him to guide him in a space where I could not.
Right.
Because I was religious and I also was conservative way more than now. But Jamie was in a space where he was fully embracing at that time.
Right.
I didn't know that I could even get to that space.
Right.
And so I released him and he took him in and nurtured him and got him into making sure he stayed in college. And I made sure that he got away from Baltimore because my mother kept me here when I really wanted to go away.
Right.
So I'm always thankful to Jamie that he was able to take him, embrace him, and move him into a space that I could not.
And I'm glad that you mentioned Jamie, because earlier we were talking about how we tend to create families of choice, right? Because a lot of times in the LGBT community, we don't have our biological families. Some of us are shunned or pushed away, or we're not embraced, or they don't show up the way that we want them to. And for the longest time, I've known both of you for years, and I know that you call each other uncle and nephew, but in my mind, I'm like, how they just saying that? So I just found out today that they are actually biological family. That is so dope. I'm glad you all were able to share that with us. So then my next question is, do you feel that your sexuality dominates conversation with people when you first meet them or, start working with them?
In my space,
yes.
It doesn't dominate, but depending on the atmosphere or the climate that I'm in, you need to know.
Okay.
I feel like you need to know. On the company I work for now, the school system, in my initial interview, I made it clear that 1, I'm openly gay, 2, and I am a community pastor.
Okay.
And they hired me.
Yeah, they were like, okay, great.
And I've been there for 3 years. I've been promoted every year.
Awesome.
I have started an organization for LGBT kids at my school. And so it just keeps going.
And that's a success story. That is a success story.
But it's a necessity.
Right.
And and for me, the spaces that I roll in right now, most of them are really gay. So like, it's not like I'm one of many. It's very rare that I'm like one of a few. And I just was accepted into a fellowship, and it was 80 of us from all across the country, and that was probably one of the first times in a really long time that I've probably been one of a few people that I can count on my hand.
Oh,
so
wow.
I went in that space really conscious about who I am, not necessarily trying to like self-edit, but like just conscious, like, are they going to accept me?
Right.
And particularly around the Black heterosexual men who I'm always trying to build a brotherhood with and not trying to sleep with, contrary to popular belief. And so really trying to be in that space with them. And so in that space, I was probably like one of 4.
Okay.
And it was beautiful because there was a level of understanding and recognition of who I was, probably because I didn't really care about,
if you accept or not.
Right.
This is who I am.
But I did want to build community. And so I was really always thinking about, like, how can I build with these folks? And I just, so for me, most of my life at this point is it's bubbles or circles and networks of people who are extremely affirming if they're not gay or they're really gay.
So do you ever feel like you have to draw the line in conversations centered around your sexuality, whether it's in a professional environment, a personal environment? Like, is there ever a time where you're trying to divert the conversation from your sexuality?
Yes and no. So my principal, who is heterosexual, often asks me about dating. Like, so do you date like guys?
Oh my goodness.
I think it comes from a sincere space because we have multiple people at my school that are same-gender loving, and some are married and some are not. Some DL folks, whatever. And because I'm open, I think he feels like it's a safe conversation.
Right.
And so I'd be like, no.
Maybe.
I got a new phone yesterday. He was like, well, you got a new babe, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, what is that? Oh, well, you got a new phone, so I'm going to the baby can see you better. Because my screen was totally cracked.
Oh my goodness.
Really? Is he going to do this today?
TMI.
So, and I don't feel any kind of way about it.
Right.
But just in relation to the question, so some of my colleagues are from the Nation of Islam. And so the guys are kind of iffy. But the girl is like, hey, boo, blah, blah. She
Yeah.
So I don't feel Sometimes yes,
Sometimes no.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot of people asking me like a lot of questions. I mean, like if someone asks me something, I'm usually like willing to entertain the idea of having a conversation about something related to my sort of sexual identity. And the only time that I will actually push back is if I don't know the person that well. And see, because people don't have boundaries. So some people sometimes will walk up to me having no history with me and assume that they can ask me all types of questions. In which case I'd be like, nah, bro, we're not doing this. So let's go somewhere else. And like, because there's no relationship. What are you going to do with the information?
Exactly.
How is it going to enhance sort of your life or my life or enrich me by talking to you about this?
Is this educational?
Is it, like, how does it benefit me? If it don't benefit me, it's no real
It's real no value. Yeah. I completely understand. And I asked that question because I'm in a lot of heterosexual spaces. And I tend, once I feel like I have to come out every day, and then I tend to become the expert on LGBT life. And suddenly people want to know, so what happens when this person likes this person? And then I'm constantly like, okay, I'm at work. We're not going to have this conversation here. Meet me for drinks. Right. You know, that kind of thing. Only if you're buying. Okay. So what's the hardest part, you think, living out loud professionally in Baltimore? If there is a hard part.
For me, the hard part is around in religious spaces. That's the hardest thing for me. Because it depends on which church I'm in. I feel great. I feel totally embraced.
Open, accepted, right.
Especially, if the pastor, when I come in and the pastor recognizes me from the pulpit but then when I'm in other religious spaces, I feel like I'm just a member of that church. And then having done so many writings around LGBT and religion and how the eternal is including us, has included us, and always will include LGBT people in salvation of humanity, that's when it becomes a tricky conversation.
Right.
Like, God don't like you. No, sir, he does. And I got scripture to back it up.
Right. Calm down.
Yeah, calm down, read this. So only in those spaces. Other than that, it's never a problem.
Yeah, and I don't know, for me, like if I think about like over my lifetime, it was hard because, I didn't have as much agency, right? I was living at home. I didn't have as much support. Like, I didn't have enough resources. Right now that I'm a full grown ass man, like it's really, really hard for me to find a space to like, where I don't
feel any kind of way, right?
Feel any kind of way about where I'm navigating. What I do think, which is always a bit, and which one of my friends from Atlanta asked, it was about safety. And do I feel safe? And I think I don't walk around with a sense of safety often. I know that anytime I go out on these streets, the more that I am me, the more likely that I could be a target. And I don't let that deter me, but I'm conscious of it. And I think for me, like living in any city, and it's not just Baltimore, it is like any city that I've ever been to, I'm always worried because there are always these people out there who don't have the same regard for your life as they do theirs. Right. And I think that's, for me, I think that's a life thing. That's a lifelong journey thing. Yeah. And sort of trying to maintain my sense of, internal sense of safety, even though I'm walking the streets in my skinny jeans and sort of my tight stuff, and hoping and wondering whether or not this could be the day that I could be a Jesse Smollett.
Right. So to follow up with your statement, how you are conscious of your safety in whatever environment you're in whatever city you're in, I wanted to add to that, do you feel that as a Black man, that there's a level of safety that you have to be concerned about as well?
I think so. I mean, like there are moments when I'm like walking down the street, when I was in Amherst, for example, where I think race was more like present because I was in a predominantly white area. Okay. And that's in that space I felt like I could be a target for anything. Baltimore is a little different when I'm home. It's less about sort of being Black because it's like 65% folk Black here. Right, and right. So, I don't feel that same fear around race and sort of being like a race-based attack. I feel like it's often it's going to be about my sexuality. And so, but when I'm traveling to places in rural counties or different parts of the city, even still where you go in and you just clearly know you're not supposed to be there, I think I worry about my safety.
Right. So from your perspectives, is there a difference between the Black gay experience and the white gay experience?
Absolutely.
Okay, so can you articulate to us?
Without a question.
So there's a difference between, a couple things. One, there's still there's homophobia within the white experience towards the Black experience.
Okay.
Then we have to talk about what else? There's so much. Ageism. There's an issue within ageism in regards to. So at the basic level, we need to talk about some. And I want to be politically correct, but a lot of white queens really don't do well with the Black queens.
Okay.
This is what they call it.
So specifically, when you say queens, are you talking about more feminine, or you're saying just gay men, period?
Gay men, period.
Okay.
Most times when you talk to other organizations or other sects of races, they call us all Black queens.
Okay.
Especially because I did female impersonation for a while.
Okay.
So in those spaces, it is always the Black girls or
I see.
the Black queens, and so it's a problem.
And it's long. I mean, and I'm going to say this, and I probably shouldn't, because I know if I,
Speak your mind, child.
I know I probably shouldn't be cussing on the show either. But what was interesting, I just watched a little clip about sort of a spoof on serial killers.
Okay.
And sort of like how they always kill the Black folk.
Right,
and
first.
Right. So
Yeah.
it was a group of Black folks determining who was going to get killed, because the serial killer said, it was so many Black folk in the room, I couldn't figure out who to kill. So y'all decided to do it.
Amongst yourself.
And one of the gay men, and what he said to me was so profound. He said, gayness is only whiteness wrapped up in a bunch of dicks. And that's the difference. It is white supremacy. Like, it was this, I was like, you're right. So this notion that to be white and to be gay is to be profoundly invested in whiteness, and the only thing that makes the difference is like the dildos that you're throwing at people. And I thought that,
wow,
that was like,
I would have never thought about it from that perspective.
Because whiteness is still central, it is still permanent and paramount, and people will make decisions, particularly white LGBT folks will make decisions based on whiteness rather than their sexual identity.
I don't even know how to respond, to be completely honest, because I never really thought about it from that perspective. And that's absolutely true. So it doesn't matter what you identify as far as the LGBT spectrum, whiteness takes precedent.
So let me add on to that. So one of the organizations that I used to work with, there was a white guy who was named Gender Loving, and he rose to a place of power based off of his whiteness. He didn't have any of the credentials that were needed. And then when he finally got them, he was able to maneuver to another space. Mm-hmm. But you already had 3 other individuals on this side who already qualified, but they did not look like you.
Correct.
So
I get it.
There's still a large manifestation of whiteness, regardless of who you are. As long as your skin doesn't have melanin in it, then you have the ability to be whatever you want to be.
Yes, very true. I mean, I find that in some of the spaces that I navigate as well. Like, my qualifications, you would think would speak for themselves. But because I don't particularly fit the mold of who they think should look like this particular position, I'm sometimes overlooked. But I'm kind of loud, so I tend to make room for myself. So, exactly. So let's switch gears a little bit. I wanted to talk to you both about masculinity. Now, we talked about it briefly before in our sizzle subjects about, the things with Dwight Howard and, and how sometimes the butt of the jokes are these feminine gay men. I feel like we're in an era of toxic masculinity. So from a gay man's perspective, how do you feel masculinity kind of lives in a gay space with all of the toxic masculinity going on right now in our current society and media?
So I mentioned earlier when we had that segment about the article that I'm writing about hip hop and infiltration of hip hop culture in the LGBT community.
Right.
If you ever go to a gay bar or any type of gay establishment where it's not a professional setting,
right,
you see so much hyper masculinity. Like, from my era of time, you dressed like shoes, slacks. You were professionally dressed, casual dress. It was always some type of business attire.
Right.
And as time has progressed and we see more, the hip hop and the swinging and swagging, now you go to spaces and the boys have on baseball caps all the time, turned backwards, saggy pants, t-shirts. When I'm on social media, if I don't know you from a group, I would think that you are heterosexual, and how did you get on my page?
Okay.
Because they don't look any different.
So you think that the person embracing maleness or embracing masculinity is how they dress and appear, but then in other spaces they don't necessarily appear and dress that way?
Because one friend of mine, associate of mine, we were talking, and he was saying, he asked me, he said, well, I used to be attracted to you back in the day. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, that wasn't going to work because you were loud and boisterous when we were in, club scenes and things. And I'm not that person.
Okay.
And so
it was a personality issue for you.
A personality issue at the time. And so when I saw him recently, one, he's lost a whole lot of weight. And then two, he was like, oh yeah, I needed to find myself. And so now I'm masculine. And I'm like, well, what is it? Them or man, whatever it was, that wasn't the reason I wasn't attracted. The fact that you were loud and obnoxious many times.
So for him, it was more of an issue of you being feminine or masculine, or him being femme or masculine, whereas for you, it was a personality issue.
It was personality.
Right.
I'm not into that whole loud, crazy, you get drunk and all that.
And for me, I have an example about sort of like toxic masculinity and how it shows up. And I was in New York at my homegirl's house. She's a white Cuban. So if you see her, she looks white.
Right.
But she has Latino heritage. Like that's what she is. And then so we were in a room, and she was the only she's queer. She was the only woman in the space.
Okay.
And it was me, another black friend of mine, and a black trans man. And we were having a conversation.
Okay.
And every time she tried to interrupt, we would talk over her. And she loves us enough to say, hey, first of all, I just want you to know I've noticed the last couple times that I've tried to interject in this conversation, y'all sort of like completely interrupted me. And then we were like, oh, yeah, we sorry, boo, we love you, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
She starts talking again. We start talking over top of her again. And then she put it out a third time, and I said, this is what toxic masculinity looks like. Even in the space of love, where we love and adore this woman, we would do anything for her. We still minimize her. We still talk over her. We still make her feel like she's not welcome in the space. And it was her fucking house. And so like, this was her space, and that she invited us into. And I was just like, this on a small scale in a New York apartment, if you magnify that, where people don't care about each other, they don't have no respect for one another.
You can imagine.
What it looks like. And that's my own privilege, because I need to make sure that when I'm hanging out with gay men, that I'm not like hiring or gay men in those spaces because I have a preference for men over women, even though women are more qualified.
So how do you embrace maleness in a society of toxic masculinity, especially in the day and age of Trump and Weinstein and all of these public figures?
I mean, I guess from my standpoint, like I understand that sort of gender identity, and particularly gender performance, particularly around masculinity, what does it mean to be a man? It's always in flux and flow. And I think really trying to recognize that over time, what it meant to be a man has shifted. And so there were things that I couldn't do in the 80s that I can definitely do now and still like hold sort of my masculinity to be intact. And to have my masculinity not be an indicator of my sexuality and vice versa. So for me, what it means to embrace my sort of sexuality and my sort of masculinity, and sort of, I think for me, I sit in this place of, as long as I feel comfortable showing up in the ways that I feel are important to the world and that are supportive and nurturing and caring, and also recognizing that sometimes you might need to be aggressive, but that's not sort of my sort of default orientation.
Right.
That's how I kind of roll. And I think it's easier now because I understand that I don't need to be somebody else, right? I get to be who I am. And then when I recognize that, then I'm all good. Like I don't need that.
What bothers me is how certain folks feel like masculinity or maleness is designed or described by aggression or anger or, bravado. I was on Facebook, and I had a little bit of a confrontation with someone who said, if my son said he was gay, there's nothing I can do because I can only raise men, I can't raise women. So then we ended up getting into this back and forth, like he's still a man. Just because he's gay does not mean he's no longer a man. So it's kind of like, how do you I'm not even sure what the correct question would be, because he's still a male, and his maleness does not change because his sexuality changes.
For me, working in the school system, in my position as the Dean of Students, I am predominantly responsible for discipline. And so I'm not, and Durryle will tell you, I've never been overly aggressive, like, that's just not who I am. But in order for children to respect me in my position, literally I have to change my mindset as I'm on my way to work. When children start coming in, I have got to be Mr. Harris, who doesn't smile too much. I don't play with kids a whole lot, you know, and why are we having this problem today? Let me call your mother now, and so I can write the suspension paper. Oh, no. But when I'm like laughing and joking with, and I can't even do it with all the children. And I do have a jacket that I wear that is clearly on the back. It is a fist with LGBT, and it has the whole crowd. And even in that, you know, my high school kids, they know, all my kids pretty much know, except for my incoming 6th graders. But I have to be a certain way at work.
But is that indicative of maleness? Being professional, being stern, being on point, being able to provide discipline and correction, does that mean that your maleness is challenged because of your sexuality?
If I'm not aggressive, the children...
Or they're like, oh, because he's gay, he's not gonna...
Yeah, so my first year when I was not as aggressive, it was like, so I'm going to send you home. Oh, they would give me back talk. And as I caught on to that, for my second year, it was like, this is what we're not going to do today. I needed to change my voice. I needed to raise my voice more. I needed to have more, and we would say, put more bass in my voice. Now I have no issues with children. In public spaces, outside of work, I don't have to do all of that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't feel like at work only, I need to be more
masculine,
more aggressive. But other spaces, it's not a thing.
And I think for me, it's like that just sounds like boundaries to me, and sort of guidance, and sort of being very clear around expectations.
Right.
That does not necessarily, for me, have to show up in a way that's aggressive. It is like, I expect for you to do this thing because this is your responsibility. And because you've agreed to do it. You're in school. There's a reciprocal relationship here. You're supposed to be here learning.
Right.
And I'm here to ensure that you do this. And if you act out, these are the consequences. And for me, that doesn't necessarily change my gender performance. That doesn't make me feel more like a man or less like a man. It makes me, like you said, operate in sort of my professional space.
Right.
And I think for a lot of folks, sometimes it gets a little bit tricky, because when they talk about sort of masculinity, and particularly toxic masculinity, it's usually the stuff that is irrational. It is stuff that is beyond the normal sort of response to something. It's like, don't wear this, because if you do,
it's going to make you look a certain way.
Exactly. It's going to, and then if you don't, I hate the phrase, act like a man. Like, what does that mean? Like,
right.
It's foolish stuff like that gets sort of policed, and then young people grow up thinking like, oh, in order to be a man, I need to do this. I need to yell, I need to scream, I need to punch, I need to be like stoic and don't express my feelings, and I need to be in a space that I will, like, at a drop of a dime, be ready to fight.
Right.
And I think that's what we need to be moving away from.
Right. And I think that was...
We need to move away, but when children come from spaces, from their homes and spaces where that is predominant, then how do we make that fit in society? Because I have literally, either my families don't have a father figure, or they have one who is hyper-masculine or toxic masculine.
So is there examples of masculinity that they're seeing that's going to determine if their maleness is performed in whatever area?
And I challenge that to some degree, because I don't think you don't need a man to teach masculinity. You got masculine women. You have women who are mad dominant. And produce the same sort of toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
And the children can be following that. So I mean, it's not based in sex. And I think the problem is sometimes we think they're the same thing. We think sex and gender identity and masculinity and femininity are all sort of one thing. They're not. They're actually, it's a spectrum. And so, like, because I was at a panel and it was about men, and I talk on these panels about men and masculinity, and I asked the question: Can women raise boys to be men? And you should have seen the number of women who said no. They stood up and I said, are you sitting here telling me that you, as a black woman, are not able to teach your son how to be loving, caring, compassionate, someone who knows how to pay their bills, someone who takes care of their responsibility? Because in my mind, that's what it means to be a man. Anything else is foolishness and fuckery. And so like that's kind of like how I show up on that. It's just like I can't.
Right.
So I think you have to redefine what masculinity
Exactly,
is.
and I appreciate that because that's really what this whole conversation is about. It's about redefining what masculinity really is. Is it the person who has lots of bravado, who's ready to fight, who's very aggressive, who's yelling and screaming, who's putting down other people, mansplaining topics where you're fully educated on? Or is it the person that's responsible, caring, loving, able to express their feelings, pays their bills on time, take care of their families? That's what masculinity really is. So the reason that I got into that whole argument with the person on Facebook in that whole post was because teaching someone to be a man has nothing to do with their sexuality, in my opinion. I feel like all of the characteristics of good men, let's be clear, all of the characteristics that I have ever observed of people being good men had nothing to do with their sex. And a lot of times it had nothing to do with their gender. So that's where I'm coming from. And I feel like as a society that's moving into 2020, where we have these children coming up, and even though they may not have these examples in the home, when they come into the spaces where they're meeting Dr. Brooks and they're meeting Reverend Jeff Harris, whether it's in school or the hospital or college, that they're seeing these examples of good men, positive men, showing their masculinity, understanding that all of that is still on the same level playing field as someone who is same gender loving.
But, okay, yes. Not but.
Get off my soapbox now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I agree. But how do we get that to infiltrate their homes? Because they see me 8 hours a day, 7.5 hours, 8 hours a day. But it has to be an ongoing feeding of the children.
And the reality is they spend more time with you than they do with their families.
They do, but if that's what they see as masculinity at home, and one of my kids actually was physically assaulted by the parent because the parent felt like the child was going down the path of being same gender loving. And so he went from being a little flapping his arms walking down the hallway to now he wants to play basketball, he wants to do this other stuff that is masculine looking, but then he has a girlfriend now.
So that he's being pushed at home to assimilate a role.
Right, but so when you come in my space, I constantly say this is a safe space. This is a space for people to, it's an art school.
Right.
So you have to be in a comfortable level to be who you are. I'm comfortable, and let's back up a little bit about being in the city. So I wear my jacket that says the colored fist on the back, and I walk through Baltimore. And there are days when I do feel like somebody might get me today. And then there are days when it's like, okay, well, let's bring it on. Nothing happens. But I walk in a space where I'm comfortable. I don't care what environment I'm in. I'm still Jeff. I'm nowhere near as soft as I used to be. And that's not because of I needed to transition over. It just as I mature and become confident in who I am, I realized that I'm not as soft as I thought I was, or however you want to define it.
So has your self-esteem ever been affected by your Black gayness in a positive or negative manner?
I think the short answer is yes. I think I had to go on a journey to appreciate both of those parts of myself. Okay. And that has been something that has taken many, many years. So the short of it is yes. And I hope that every Black LGBT person is on that journey to sort of ensure that they're loving and appreciating themselves and growing.
Right.
I would have to say it's kind of hard. Because my Black gayness, I'm Black, but I'm not that Black like that. It doesn't make sense.
No.
So I'm Black. I embrace all of who I am as a Black gay man, as a Black man, but I'm not the
You mean you're not like the Black power?
I'm not.
That's
not who I am. I'm more of, yes, I'm gay. Let's have that conversation. Because it always creates a safe space. My melon always says that I'm Black. My parents are always African American. So we don't need to really have that conversation. let's keep having conversations about LGBT. And being in safe spaces and creating safe spaces and developing safe spaces and stretching that dialogue, stretching that narrative.
So then has your gayness ever affected your self-esteem?
For the positive, yes.
Okay.
Because I've always had issues around my weight. Like I've always gone up and down in my weight. But now that I'm more confident in who I am as a person, I can gain a couple pounds, lose a couple pounds. No.
Well, big shout out to In My Lane Entertainment. We are going to go to commercial real quick and check out what the people have to say on the street. We'll be right back.
Hey y'all, this your girl KK. I'm down here with Street Talk, In My Lane's Thursday night event. Let's take it to the street, see what the people gotta say. All right, what's your name?
My name is Corey.
All right, Corey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, Corey, how do you identify?
Now, can you explain that a little bit more?
How do you identify your sexual preference?
Oh, I'm gay.
Gotcha.
Nice to meet you.
So, what I would like to know is, what's the weirdest place you ever had sex?
Oh, shit. Oh, can I cuss? My bad. The weirdest place I had sex? Ooh, I mean, besides school?
High school? Middle school? Elementary?
High school.
Hey, at this point, we just need to know, this generation now taking it back.
I'm going to just rock with high school.
High school?
Yeah.
So that was the weirdest place?
Yeah, it felt weird. I mean, you got to duck and dodge. You know what I mean?
All right, I just got one more question.
Okay.
What class was it?
Oh, shucks. It wasn't no class. It was one of them classrooms where they don't really
Just ducked off?
It was ducked off.
Boom, got you. It wasn't math, y'all, so y'all stay in there. You hear me? Alrighty, we're here with, what's your name?
Garrett.
Garrett?
Mm-hmm.
All right, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So how do you identify?
I identify as gay.
Alrighty. All right, Garrett. So what was your worst sexual experience? Was it stank, a bad lay, or was it a pillow princess? Ooh. We have a thinker.
Wait, can you repeat that question one more time? I really got to think for that. I was like,
What was your worst sexual experience? Was it stank, a bad lay, or pillow princess?
all right, so what you mean by those? Like, I mean, I can kind of figure out what it mean, but, oh gosh.
Stank mean, was it bad? Like, I ain't never doing that again. Not at all. Bad lay was just like, no, we definitely not doing this no more. Pillow princess just laid there, you did all the work.
Honestly, all three before, if you want to be honest. Like
Is this all with the same person?
No.
Okay, thank God. I was about to say they out there, people. Watch out for them. All right, so pillow princess, all three, bad lay, and just messed up stank. That's how we rockin'.
All three.
Street talk here. What's your name?
Gotti.
All right, Gotti, how do you identify?
I like niggas. I like males.
How do you identify?
I'm gay.
All right. So, sex on the first date or no?
It depends.
On?
It depends on what they looking like, what they smelling like, how they acted with other niggas in the club.
All right. So, it's a club thing or, first date, y'all can go
I
out?
mean in general.
Okay.
It's a general.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, y'all heard it first. All right, we here with, what's your name?
Montez,
Montez, y'all. How do you identify?
male,
Like your sexual preference. Like,
gay.
All right. So, question for you, Montez. So, would you date a trans person?
Yes, I would. I've dated trans men before. Yes.
All righty, y'all heard it right here, right now. Queer Conversations. And another question. Who is the 44th president? You gotta know.
I don't.
Come on now.
To be on 44th president?
Yeah, right now we
Obama?
on, there you go. Because right now we on 45.
Yeah, because that's all I think about is Obama.
Yeah,
That's
there
all I
you
think
go.
about. He's the
It is-
44th, the 45th, the 46th. He's all the presidents, to be honest with you.
Right here, right now. Y'all got it first
To
from
be honest
Montez.
with you.
Thank you again to In My Lane Entertainment for allowing Queer Conversations to come out and speak to your guests. It is always a good time. These people, you never know what they're gonna say. Thank you again to Dr. Brooks. Thank you for coming in. Thank you, Reverend Harris. We really appreciate both of you for coming in today. And thank you to you, to our guests out there. Thank you for watching us. We really appreciate it. And remember, we're here at Queer Conversations are changing the world one conversation at a time. Good night.